Mass Effect is a game series that was built around choice. It was a narrative conceived with the concept that the player could tell their own story. The player would make important decisions. They would affect not only the world, but the story with it. The characters around you would be dynamic. Your own character would be dynamic. Top this all off with an incredibly detailed and interesting world behind it, and you have a recipe for success. But this was just the start, the first game in a trilogy, a grand epic told across 3 parts, and you would be there to determine what happened. Regardless of your feelings on the series, you have to recognize that the games themselves are a touchstone in the history of decision-based storytelling. I want to explore these games, their world, their characters, everything. I want to see if this series was worth it, if everything still holds up today. Since this is just the beginning, today we'll be exploring where the series started, and eventually we'll get to where it ended up. Today I'll be talking about Mass Effect's gameplay, story, mechanics, and everything in between. We'll briefly talk about the development at first to see how this game was conceived in the first place. If you enjoy the video and want to support the channel, you can do so for free by liking the video and subscribing to the channel, as it really helps me out. You can also support me over on Patreon, where I upload longer versions of my full retrospectives. I also stream on Twitch, where I play games that I'm not currently covering. Spoilers for everything Mass Effect. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I want to talk about Mass Effect. Mass Effect was developed by BioWare and published by Microsoft Game Studios for the Xbox 360. The PC version of the game was published by EA and was released a few months after the 360 version. The PlayStation 3 version was also published by EA, but wasn't released on the system until 5 years later via the Mass Effect Trilogy bundle. The game was directed by Casey Hudson, who had only directed one other game at this point, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. He had done level design and art for games like MDK2, Neverwinter Nights, and provided additional programming to Baldur's Gate 2. Hudson already had some experience working on some very large RPG games previous to Mass Effect. The team for Mass Effect was already experienced in developing games for the Xbox, so they decided to develop the game for the 360. 130 people were involved in making the game, and they took the first 6 months just to figure out how the game was going to look. Mass Effect was built on Unreal Engine 3 as a framework. They added additional components for squad combat and space travel, adjusting it to their needs. The team really wanted to hammer in on the tech from the beginning because Mass Effect was conceived as a trilogy from the beginning. Because they knew they wanted to make 3 games from the get-go, they knew they had to have the fundamentals down so that they could repeat them. Hudson wanted to focus on giving the player the ability to control a central character in the narrative and have the ability to impact important decisions. This would provide them the ability to give players an intense and cinematic power, while also retaining the uniqueness and customization of a classic BioWare game. Unlike traditional BioWare games at the time, though, they wanted to evolve the turn-based system into a hybrid. Tactics and customization would still be there, but delivered through an intuitive interface. One of the largest teams was tasked with creating a massive galaxy that players could explore. Drew Karpyshyn was the main writer for Mass Effect, but each planet in the overall world of Mass Effect had its own assigned writer. This gave each planet its own distinct style and also created a better workflow for the large amount of writing that needed to be done. Even though each planet had its own writer, it was up to the team to come together, give suggestions, and keep a consistent style throughout the universe. The art of Mass Effect was inspired heavily by films like Star Wars, Alien, Blade Runner, and Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, oddly enough. Jack Wall was the composer for Mass Effect, who had previously worked on Jade Empire. Hudson knew what he wanted the game to sound like, but let Wall run wild and express himself. Hudson wanted to marry the electronic instrument palette of the late 70s/early 80s with more organic elements. Mass Effect was originally announced at the X05 trade show on October 4th, 2005. It was later shown off at E3 and the X06 show in 2006, and at GDC and E3 again in 2007. Mass Effect was released for the Xbox 360 on November 20th, 2007 in North America. A few notes need to be made before we get into things. The first is on the structure of this review. If you've ever seen my videos before, you'll know that I like to tailor the structure of each review to the game that I'm playing. I've done this for most every series that I've covered, and I'll be doing it for Mass Effect. Because Mass Effect places such a high emphasis on making decisions, I will be presenting both sides of those decisions. I will first go through my normal playthrough of the game, talking about the story, gameplay, mechanics, and characters. This playthrough will mostly be Paragon, Mass Effect's term for good or heroic on their morality scale. This is because these are the choices that I normally pick. After that, I'll quickly cover my other playthrough, where I mostly chose Renegade options, so that I can show the contrast between both playthroughs and determine whether the choices you make actually affect the game that we're playing. This decision is also in the interest of being as comprehensive as possible. The second note is about the version of Mass Effect that I played for this review. Many versions of the original game have been released over the years. The first was released on the Xbox 360, and then later it was ported to PC. It was also released on the PS3 as a part of the Mass Effect trilogy, and finally a remastered version was released on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. This was a remaster of all three original games in the series and made some slight changes. The Legendary Edition was originally conceived as a remake, but once the amount of work was calculated to switch the games from their original Unreal Engine 3 and 4 based frameworks, they realized it wasn't worth it. This edition makes a ton of changes to the original game, mostly in the form of visual upgrades. The first game in the series is the most changed visually, seeing huge upgrades to character models and environments. The HUD was notably changed to look more like the recent games in the series. Some notable changes are the hacking decryption minigame and the Mako having no XP penalty for killing enemies when inside of it. Most of the changes relate to quality of life and are generally good. They also create a much more cohesive experience between the three games. For example, a large decision that you have to make at the end of the game was again decided at the beginning of the second game, because the first game didn't save after you made this decision. This is now changed, and that decision carries over directly into the first game. Since the Mass Effect series carries your saves over to the next entry, this is a pretty big change in the service of making the three games blend better. Also, upgrading the visuals and keeping a similar HUD style for the three games makes them flow better overall. My only real problem with this entry is how fucked up the base Shepard's eyes look, but I can overlook that. Mass Effect begins with a character creator. We have a few choices here, and the first is our gender. I decided to go with a male Shepard for my playthroughs because that's just what I always pick. I also decided to leave Shepard's name as John Shepard, mainly because I wanted to keep the character as close to the canon design for it that I could. I left his appearance similar too, so I could keep that iconic look to the main character. I wouldn't keep the same restraints for my Renegade playthrough though. We're allowed to choose a pre-service history here, basically one of three generic backstories. These have some slight effects in the game, but nothing major. Colonist sees your character being raised on Minidwar, a border colony. Your friends and family were slaughtered by slavers, and you become an Alliance military member after being saved by them. Earthborn sees your character raised on the streets of Earth and leaving a life of petty crime to join the Alliance military. Spacer is the one I chose for this playthrough, which sees you coming from an Alliance military family and following in their footsteps. We're then allowed to choose a psych profile. This is the second part of our background, basically what happened during the beginning parts of serving in the Alliance military. Ruthless sets your background as someone who is cold, calculating, and brutal. In another word, ruthless. Sole Survivor sees your character having been on a mission gone bad and was the last to survive while the rest of their crew fell around them. The one I chose, War Hero, saw my character single-handedly saving their fellow soldiers' lives from defeat in a dangerous mission. The last choice we have to make before we get into the game is our military specialization. This is basically our RPG class. It determines the talents that you'll be able to use and what powers you have access to. I chose Soldier here, which is more of the frontline fighter. They mostly use guns, have better health, and focus on armor. This seemed like it fit the character the most and was also my playstyle. With that done, we get a conversation between two unseen people talking about our main character, Shepard. They reference the Skillian Blitz, an event from our past where a human colony called Elysium was assaulted by pirates and slavers. Because we chose War Hero, we saved many from that disaster. The speakers are determining that Shepard is the man for the mission they need to go on. We get a text scroll with some brief backstory on this new universe we're about to enter. In 2148, artifacts were discovered on Mars that propelled humanity forward in technological development. It allowed them to travel space, and it was called Mass Effect. Joker, the pilot of the Normandy, the ship we're currently serving on, is navigating through space. Shepard comes into the cockpit, and we have our first dialogue choice. Joker believes there's a reason that the Council wanted a Spectre on their ship. Spectres are a special class of agents with high authority given by the Citadel Council, the ruling government over Citadel space. We choose all of our dialogue in Mass Effect through this small wheel at the bottom of the screen. If you've ever played one of these games, you'll know that the options are pretty formulaic. The top right option is generally the Paragon option, or morally good choice. The bottom right is the Renegade, or morally bad choice. The middle is usually some neutral ground between both. Choosing a Paragon option or a Renegade option will give us morality points on that specific scale. This works differently than most RPG systems that usually have a scale that slides from one side to the other. Because there are two separate scales, doing something good will not technically make up for a horrific action. That stain will still be on your record. Gaining more points in these scales will give us the ability to level up the charm or intimidate talents slightly higher. Certain levels also give us higher health or lower cooldowns depending on which side. The higher our charm or intimidate, the more dialogue options we'll get. Paragon options that require charm will be colored blue, and Renegade will be colored red. These are usually pretty drastic actions that can affect the mission itself or determine the outcome of the overall story. Because of the formula and the way the choices are laid out, if you're going for a Paragon playthrough, then you're kind of stuck just always picking the top right option. There's not a lot of sitting and deciding what choice you actually want to make. You're just defaulting to the top right option. This is one of the downsides to the system that has been heavily criticized in the past. One of the other criticisms of this system is that the choices we are shown don't always accurately represent what Shepard is about to say. There's just always a slightly different implication to what Shepard says and what we think we're saying. It's not always bad, but there's some egregious examples across these games. We can also use this wheel to ask more in-depth questions, investigating into someone's past or asking them more about the history of a people, for example. Overall, the system is alright, and I certainly think it's a product of its time. It's a little formulaic and doesn't provide a lot of variety outside of black and white options, or rather, red and blue. The captain of the Normandy wants to speak with Shepard. I made my way to the back of the ship, talking to Navigator Presley on the way. He had a problem with the other aliens on our ship, one that I had to talk him out of. I met Nihilus in the comm room, who was also waiting for Captain Anderson. Nihilus was a Turian, one of the many races present in Mass Effect's universe. On top of that, he was a Spectre, and his presence on the ship was making people uncertain. We were headed to Eden Prime, a colony world that the humans have established. It's a symbol of their ability to spread out across the galaxy. See, the backstory that we got in the beginning of the game was important. The humans discovered artifacts on Mars that propelled their society forward and allowed them to travel the universe, allowing them to become a part of many different civilizations. But that was in 2148, and our story takes place in 2183. Humans' first contact with another race, the Turians, was in 2157, and it hasn't even been 30 years since they've begun to discover that there's other species or intelligent life. They aren't exactly integrated just yet. Eden Prime exists as an example that humans are capable of establishing other worlds. It's important. Captain Anderson briefs Shepard on the mission. They're heading to Eden Prime for 3 reasons. The first is that they're utilizing this new ship, the Normandy, which is a marvel of technology. It was developed with assistance from Turians, a collaborative project between the race of humans and Turians. The second is that they found traces that an artifact is on Eden Prime, a Prothean artifact. This is of a large importance because the artifact found on Mars was Prothean in origin and could provide similarly important advances to technology and society. The third reason is that Shepard is being considered for the Spectres. The Council is watching him to see if he's qualified to join their ranks. This is also incredibly important because Shepard would be the first human Spectre, further solidifying their presence in the galaxy. As this conversation happens, we receive a communication from the planet, showing that the Geth have arrived and begun to attack the planet, as well as some massive ship with tendril-like appendages. We head down to the planet and begin to investigate. We quickly see some flying robots gun down a soldier and take them out. I ordered to give the man a proper burial after this was all done. Heading through the forests on the planet, we rescued a woman who was being attacked by more robots. These are AI that were created by another race, the Quarians, as a species of laborers. They became sentient and eventually overthrew the Quarians. The interesting thing about the Geth is that they haven't been seen outside of the Perseus Veil in 300 years, so none of this is routine. Ashley Williams was the one being attacked by the Geth, and her crew was wiped out. I invited her to join us so that she could try and survive. We fight through more Geth and the beacon is gone. Ashley says that it was in this camp, but it's nowhere to be found. On our way to look for the beacon, we encountered some husks, reanimated human corpses. The Geth place these bodies on spikes and it replaces their organs with cyberkinetics, bringing them back as, well, husks. We defeat them and found 2 researchers hiding out in a small building. Dr. Warren was the one that found the Prothean beacon, but she said it was moved to the spaceport when the group was attacked. Her assistant is rambling and seems to think some sort of end times are coming. On the way to the spaceport, we see a cutscene. Nihilus, the Spectre, is confronting another Turian named Saren. Saren says he was sent by the Council to help, but shoots Nihilus when he turns away. We found another group of survivors that are involved in smuggling. I told them they were breaking the law. He gave me a pistol, and I convinced him to give me some of the smuggling supplies. We found Nihilus's body and a human hiding behind some crates. He saw Nihilus get shot and hid. He told us his name was Saren, and we then see him working with the Geth and ordering them to destroy the colony. We have to deactivate the 4 different demolition charges that have been set in the area, while also fighting off the Geth. We defeated them and finally secured the beacon. Kaiden and Ashley began to investigate it, while Shepard called the ship. Ashley is drawn to the beacon as it activates, but Shepard saves her. He begins to see visions, but the beacon explodes. We see Saren being briefed by an unidentified woman. He's angered to learn the beacon has been used and destroyed. He orders the human, Shepard, killed. We awake aboard the Normandy, and I couldn't recall any of the things that the beacon showed me. It's certainly a bad sign, though. The Council is going to want answers because the mission was basically a failure. With Nihilus dead, the Geth invading, and the beacon destroyed, our mission was definitely not accomplished. Anderson says that Saren is a Spectre, but he's apparently gone rogue and has a huge bone to pick with humans. He shares the sentiments that a lot of aliens do, that humans are growing too fast and too new to be gaining this much ground. At this point, we're heading to see the Council and tell them about what I saw in the beacon. The Citadel is a massive space station, supposedly constructed by the Protheans. Speaking of the Protheans, I should note that they mysteriously disappeared 50,000 years ago. No one knows how they disappeared or why, they were just gone. They had a massive empire and are the reason a lot of the civilizations that exist even have the technology that they do. The Citadel itself is the capital of the Citadel Council and serves as a sort of base of operations for a lot of the universe. Once arriving, we checked in with Udina, the human ambassador on the station. We all headed to the council and Saren was there via hologram. He asked the council to dismiss the charges against him, and of course, they agreed. We have to compile evidence to prove to the council that Saren is a traitor. Our first lead is a shadow broker who trades information. We head to him and he gives us information on a mercenary named Urdnot Rex, who worked with a crime lord named Fist, who is also connected to Saren. Rex decides to join us. We also talk to a woman named Dr. Michelle, who was being shaken down by Fist's goons. A Turian named Garrus Vicarian was protecting her and we helped him out. He joined our squad as well to get information out of Fist. We finally headed to Fist, who said that a Quarian with a lot of information on Saren is about to be killed in 4 minutes. We don't have much time, and I was going to leave Fist to his own devices, but Rex let his feud get the best of him and shot him. We headed to save the Quarian, who was in fact being menaced in an alley by Saren's men. Her name is Talizora Naraya. She has evidence of Saren admitting his traitorous nature and his true goal, which is to find something called the Conduit. Supposedly, this device will allow him to bring back something called the Reapers. I had to convince the ambassador to let her join the crew. We presented our evidence to the council, and it finally convinced them. They believed that Saren needed to be stopped, and Shepard was going to be the one to do it. I was officially made a Spectre by the council, and my goal was to hunt down Saren. I was also given control of the Normandy by Captain Anderson. Apparently, Anderson was originally in line to become the first human Spectre years ago, but Saren stopped it. The only problem with this whole thing is that the council doesn't believe the Reapers are a threat, or even real. It's going to be hard to find Saren at this point, but we can try and find the Conduit before he does. He had Geth looking on 2 planets, Noveria and Pharos. The last lead is a woman named Liara Tassoni. She's the daughter of Matriarch Benezia, the woman that we saw talking to Saren. She's currently running an archaeological dig on the planet Therum. At this point, we have free run of the galaxy. We can go wherever we want for the most part. We can seek out one of these 3 leads, or head to other planets, other systems, to seek out others who need our crew's help. Boarding the Normandy, I gave my crew a rousing speech. With a new commander, they needed to know that I was strong and there to support them. Before we left, I decided to make my way around the Citadel. Maybe there were some supplies I could gather before we left, something to help make our journey a little easier. There was a Solarian scientist in the Citadel Tower that wanted me to scan the Keepers around the station. The Keepers are another interesting species because they only exist on the Citadel. The only thing they seem to do is maintain the station's systems. It's believed that they were created by the Protheans, since they were found in the Citadel. Chorban wants to know more about the Keepers, but the Citadel doesn't exactly like scientists scanning them, so he wanted me to do it. Before I could scan all of them, I came across a man named Jalid. He thinks that Chorban is going to kill him. Apparently they're both working on this thing together. I went to see Chorban and he told us the truth, that he and Jalid had developed a tool to fully scan the Keepers. Chorban says he wasn't trying to kill Jalid, who stole the data on the Keepers from him. I told him to stop scanning the Keepers and return what he stole. It was still against the law. I told Jalid that I had to report him to the authorities. The preliminary data revealed that the Keepers were as old as the Citadel itself, but it didn't matter. Jalid broke the law. I turned him in. I found a man outside of a gambling hall who had just been kicked out. He gave me a device to test out that would let me win at some of the slot-like games inside. I took it and immediately turned it into one of the workers. I found a woman named Helena Blake that wanted me to take out 2 large crime organizations. They were on a remote world across the galaxy hiding out. I decided to help her. If they were as bad as she said, they needed to be finished. The last thing I did on the Citadel before heading out was meet an Asari consort. She was a sort of comfort woman, if you catch my drift. One of her clients was threatening to leak secrets about her. I found the man, a Turian general of some great renown. I decided to appeal to his military past and get him to stop spreading lies about the consort. As a reward for the help, Sha'ira gave me a special trinket. She didn't know what it was for, but she insisted it must be useful, and she was right. It was finally time for me to leave the Citadel and head out into the wider universe. I boarded the Normandy and set course for Therum. If I was going to figure out where Benezia was to try and get to Saren's motives, then it probably made sense to question her daughter first. On Therum, we get our first taste of driving the Mako, our Land Rover vehicle that we use to traverse planets. Before we talk about that, we should probably talk about the combat of Mass Effect. Some things have been changed with the Legendary Edition of the game, but these are mostly tuning/HUD differences. The overall effect is still the same. Half of Mass Effect's combat functions like a shooter. We can fire at enemies with a pistol, shotgun, assault rifle, or a sniper, all of which can be switched out in combat on the fly. In addition to this, we can use a set of talents. These are special powers that each character can use to either augment their own abilities or fire some sort of projectile. Weapons in the game do not have ammo, but firing repeatedly will overheat them, causing us to have to wait for the cooldown. We can use a talent called Overkill to stop overheating for a few seconds, giving us a brief period where we can deal large damage. The Unity talent will allow us to revive fallen team members. The Shield Overload ability will remove an enemy's shields, allowing us to damage their health directly. Most characters, including enemies, have shields and health. Shields regenerate, but health has to be healed with Medigel. Speaking of teammates, every time we land somewhere or start a mission, we will be able to choose our squad. We can take 2 members of our team out there with us. Each teammate has a different list of skills and proficiencies. Tali is more aligned to electronics, decryption, and attacking the cyberkinetics. Ashley is a soldier, so she's better with guns and weapons over biotic powers. Earning enough experience will allow us to level up not only our character, but the other characters on our team. We can choose skills that increase proficiency in certain weapons, abilities, charm, intimidate, or even special sub-skills like Spectre for Shepard. Mass Effect's combat works alright. It feels pretty good to drain an enemy's health meter. Aiming the powers doesn't always work the greatest. Sometimes I'd be shooting an AI overload at the box I was standing beside, rather than the enemy at the end of the field. The cover system itself is also a little finicky. You have to run up to a box or wall to take cover on it, but sometimes we'll just flop around instead of actually protecting ourselves. It's not bad overall, but there are some glaring issues, like the teammate AI being mostly useless at certain points. I don't think the combat is the greatest strength of the series, let's just put it that way. Like I said before, we can also do combat in the Mako. We use this vehicle to get around planets and killing enemies along the way. We can fire our turret or explosives at them to decimate the forces in our way. In the original version of the game, you got an XP penalty for killing enemies inside the Mako. You only received 50% of XP, meaning if you wanted the most XP, you had to get out and kill enemies on foot. This was changed in the Legendary Edition, and is probably one of my favorite changes. Why make these long sections and give you the ability to kill enemies if you're just going to penalize me for it? Making our way across Therum required us to wipe out Geth bases, open gates, and cover lots of ground. Eventually we found the dig site, but the Geth were swarming it. We have to fight new enemies here, Geth Stalkers. These things jump around to different walls and try to shoot at us. They can be hard to pin down. There's a Geth armature at the end of the area that sort of functions as a pseudo-boss for this area. It's a large machine that shoots huge projectiles at us that are basically insta-kill. Once we defeat these enemies, we can head into the dig site and find Liara Tassoni, suspended in a Prothean security device. I told her that I'd find some way to get her out. She shouldn't worry. Heading inside, the Geth were already here. Defeating them led us to a laser that could carve us a path behind the security device. We shut down the containment field, but there were bigger problems. The mining laser was causing the dig site to cave in. On top of that, we got ambushed by a Krogan and his Geth. He wanted us to hand Liara over, but we told him no. Saren wanted her, and they attacked us. Krogans are a little more difficult to fight than other species because when we kill them, there's a short time where they can regenerate their health and come back. It's paramount that we damage them as much as we can when they're down. After we defeated the group, we made our escape. One of the really odd things about Mass Effect's cutscenes are that most of them don't really have dialogue. They all feel really awkward and quiet because it's only environmental sounds, no words, grunts, or shouts from the people escaping the collapsing mineshaft. Back on the Normandy, Liara says she spent 50 years researching the Protheans. She thinks the conduit may have had something to do with their extinction. Liara seems to think that someone came along and cleansed the galaxy of information regarding the Protheans' disappearance, but the Protheans weren't the first that this has happened to. Liara has never heard of the Reapers, but wants to help the journey, and she joins our crew officially as our final member. The Council contacts us to debrief after the mission on Therum. Sparatus, the Turian council member, is of course critical of the fact that we destroyed the dig site. I got a call about a hostage situation on a nearby ship in another system. I boarded the ships and defeated the terrorists. They were attacking politicians who had allowed them to experiment on others. I talked them down and got them to release their hostage. I took a mission back on the Citadel to track down 2 crime organizations. After taking them out, the woman Helena Blake wanted me to meet her on another planet. She reveals that the people we destroyed were her partners. She was a part of the crime syndicate, and she's now the leader. I put her under arrest. I had to take down her and her entire crew. The last mission I took on before I headed off to another lead on Saren had to do with Rex. Before we get to that, I have to explain a few things. Most of the side missions that we receive in Mass Effect, like the ones we just talked about, are generally given to us through comms as we enter solar systems, are found on the Citadel, or by wandering onto the surface of planets. Most of these missions are about random conflicts in the universe, but may provide some additional context for the world of Mass Effect. There are a few missions that we can take part in that come from the crew of our ship. One of these in particular was from Rex. Rex had some family armor that was taken by the Turians during the Krogan rebellions, and is now being held by someone named Ton Actus. To give proper context to this mission, and Rex as a character, we should probably talk about the Krogans themselves. One of the things that Mass Effect does best is developing an interesting and in-depth world surrounding its species, worlds, characters, and history. Everything is well contextualized, thought out, and anything but surface level. Existing in the world, it can seem a little daunting. Terms are thrown around that we know nothing about. These terms, though, are usually further explained in the Codex menu, but this feels normal. It even feels in-world because the human race hasn't existed in these external conflicts for very long, so the player is out of the loop, learning as we go, and so are the humans themselves. I'm sure most humans know much more than we, the player, do when starting the game, but it's still a good parallel. Because of this, I'd like to quickly give some context for each of the species in the world of Mass Effect. This will by no means be an exhaustive explanation of Mass Effect's lore, but since we have multiple alien species on our ship and their stories will inevitably intertwine with ours, it probably makes sense to talk about each of these species. I also won't be going into every single species in Mass Effect because there are some that just aren't as prominent as others. There's also certain alien races that don't appear until later games that we'll get into when we talk about those. We'll start with the Asari. They come from Thessia, a planet in the Parnithia system, described as the beating heart of galactic love. The Asari are a respected species, known for diplomacy and their biotics. They were one of the first species to achieve interstellar flight after the Protheans. Asari are monogender and all appear feminine, but can have partners of any gender or species. They live for 1,000 years and generally try to avoid conflict. One of the biggest parts of their history is helping form the Council itself. The second species to join the Citadel Council were the Salarians. They are warm-blooded amphibians who hail from Surkesh, a planet in the Pranas system. Surkesh is said to look like the jungles on Earth, dangerous but beautiful and teeming with life. Salarians have a quick metabolism. They're quick-witted, speak fast, and move faster. This leaves them thinking that most other species appear slow and dull. This fast metabolism, though, usually leaves them with a short lifespan of about 40. The Solarians are not particularly military adept, but they are seen as the intelligence part of the Council races. Before we talk about the third race to join the Council, the Turians, we need to talk about the Krogans. The Krogans are a non-Citadel race, which means they don't have an embassy on the Citadel. They come from Tuchanka, a planet in the Aralak system. Tuchanka was a harsh world, but the Krogans survived in these extreme conditions and were probably tempered by it. As they grew, so did their technology, and they destroyed their own homeworld with nuclear war. Fortunately, the Solarians helped the Krogans out of their homeworld, but they had ulterior motives. The Solarians and the Citadel were currently fighting a war, the Rachni Wars to be specific. In the interest of being brief, these were a series of conflicts between the Citadel races and the Rachni, a species of hive-minded insects. They were intelligent, but could not be negotiated with. The Citadel races were losing, and the Solarians enlisted the help of the Krogan. The Krogan's breeding cycle was very quick, which allowed them to provide the large numbers they needed to win this war. After the Rachni were defeated and the Krogan resettled on a new world, another problem arose. The Krogan couldn't control their numbers now that their homeworld couldn't do it for them. This meant they had to spread out across the galaxy. They started to inhabit many different worlds that were very much Citadel species turf. Eventually, it got far enough that they had to be stopped, and a war waged for 300 years. The Citadel eventually had to enlist the help of the Turians. They launched a bioweapon that was developed by the Solarians called the genophage. This caused 99% of Krogan offspring to die in infancy, only 1 in 1,000 surviving. This brings them to where they are today, suffering from this disease, the genophage, and their numbers slowly dwindling. With that, we can now talk about a third race to join the Citadel Council, the Turians. Their homeworld was originally Palaven, a planet in the Trebia system. Turians have a military-based culture and are disciplined. The reason that they got on the council in the first place was their part in the Krogan rebellions and deploying the genophage. They have provided starships, soldiers, and bolstered the entire Citadel fleet. One of the bigger parts of their history, leading to the tensions between them and the humans, was the First Contact War. When humans found the Prothean artifact on Mars, they began expanding rapidly. They found the mass relays placed about space. These are another Prothean creation that allows one to travel quickly throughout space. The humans had reactivated a relay called 314. It was the same relay that led to the start of the Rachni Wars and was forbidden to be reactivated. The Turians didn't negotiate, though, and began firing on humans. This caused a short war between the two races. The Citadel eventually intervened and stopped things, forcing the Turians to pay reparations to the humans affected, and through this, the humans were made aware of the Citadel. Another non-Citadel race that we should talk about are the Quarians. As we talked about before, the Quarians created the Geth, a race of artificial intelligences. These were used primarily for manual labor, but the Geth eventually became sentient. They overthrew their creators and forced the Quarians into becoming a nomadic species. They now exist aboard the Migrant Fleet, a flotilla of ships that travel together. Quarians generally stay in the Migrant Fleet, but at an early age, they have to take on their pilgrimage. This is a rite of passage in Quarian society, requiring them to leave the fleet, see other worlds, and experience other cultures. The only requirement is that they come back to the fleet with something of value. These are the really important races for now. Some other species will crop up over the next games, and we'll talk about them when we get to them. There are some species that currently exist that don't really have an effect on the overall story yet, like the Hanar or the Elcor. Like I said, I won't really go into those yet as they're not as documented as the others. Now that we've talked about those races, you'll have a better understanding of their reservations when dealing with some of the other species, or even their alliances to others. Mass Effect is very much a universe built on tension. Humans are still very weary of all other races. Most species are still very wary of humans. There's a clear tension that exists between Turians and Krogans. War has plagued these people for centuries, and that can be felt throughout the entire tale. With that, I headed to the planet to defeat Ton Actus and take Rex's armor back for him. Rex had been hard to read up to this point. Krogans are a hard people, but he expressed that he was finally starting to like me. This was an important step forward. Because of the galactic tensions, we had to be a united crew, especially if we were going to get the job done. In space, we can also survey many planets. We can't land on every single one. Most systems have just one planet that we can physically traverse and explore. Some of the others can be inspected to find deposits of materials or relics of the past that can give us credits or experience. The planets that can be landed on usually tie into some sort of side mission, but there's multiple other things that can be completed on those planets as well. We can find mineral deposits, crashed probes, abandoned outposts or camps. This all usually results in us finding credits, weapons, supplies, or experience. It's generally pretty worth it to do a lot of this exploration because this will see us gaining a lot of levels. I can't say that exploring every single planet wasn't kind of a tedious endeavor though. After the 10th one, I started to get a little bit burnt out on driving the Mako over mountains, getting out, grabbing an iron deposit, getting back in, and heading to the next thing. There are some side planets that have some specifically interesting content, though. The planet Elitania, for example, was a grass-covered green mountainous place. Some strange monkey-like species had stolen a data card from a crashed probe, and I had to search every one of them to see if I could get it back. Not only that, but there was some strange artifact on this planet as well. It just so happened to react to that trinket that Shiara gave me back on the Citadel. This gave me some type of strange vision, one of a primitive human species being monitored by the Protheans. Were the Protheans observing humans long ago? How long had they been watching us? The final line of this is telling. "I'm fine," you finally reply, realizing this is a mystery you will probably never solve. I talked to Tali on board the ship, who told me about her current pilgrimage away from the fleet. At the same time, we got a request to stop some Geth in the Armstrong Nebula. After taking out many clusters on different planets, we located the main base and defeated them as well. Tali requested that I give her a copy of the Geth data cache that we found on the planet. It would be the perfect item of value for her pilgrimage since it documented the Geth's evolution since they left the Quarians. I gave it to her, knowing that it could mean she would leave the mission. She didn't, though. She said her pledge was to stop Saren, and would not return to the fleet until that was completed. Garrus was a member of CSEC, or Citadel Security Services. They were responsible for upholding the law on the Citadel and protecting it. During that time, CSEC let a criminal, a Solarian doctor, escape, named Dr. Salion. Garrus knew that he would use the hostages that he took as test subjects, and now Garrus wants to track him down. We found him on a ship with his test subjects, just like Garrus said. Garrus wanted to kill him, but I told Garrus to calm down. We should arrest him and give him to the authorities. He ran away anyways and had to be killed. Garrus questioned my methods, but I told him that you can only do the right thing. You can't predict how people will react, but you can control how you respond. Garrus was thankful for the lesson in temperance. This whole thing was a huge detour from our main mission, but it proved that there were other people in the galaxy that could use our help, even the ones on our own ship. I headed back to the Citadel before we made our way to Noveria to continue looking for Saren. An inspector, one who didn't particularly like Turians, wanted to look at the Normandy. He didn't like the fact that Turians helped design it, but I shot down every one of his criticisms. I had a TV interview from a woman who wanted to run a profile on the first human Spectre. She was trying to get me to play into her narrative that I was just working for the Council, so I politely stopped the interview before she could get anything out of me. After buying some equipment, we made our way to Noveria, the last known location of Matriarch Benezia. The guards at the front of the landing dock wanted me to give up my arms. My crew didn't want to comply, but I knew they were just doing their jobs. Inside the colony, we find out that Matriarch Benezia has been seen in the area, but she went up to a research station called Peak 15. Unfortunately, the planet is experiencing some terrible snow, so we have to get permission to leave. Anale, the one in charge, won't let us leave and is protecting Benezia. We talked to a man named Lorik Keen, who has a garage pass for us. We have to get into his office, though, which is currently being ransacked by Ananias' people. We need to retrieve the data there and bring it back to him. When we head there, we're attacked and have to wipe out the guards to get Lorik's data. Parasini works for Anale and is actually a part of internal affairs, investigating him for corruption. She needs Lorik to testify to nail the man down. I told Lorik what happened and convinced him to testify. Parasini arrested Anale, and I got my garage pass so I could leave this place. Geth attacked us on the way out, and we made our way through the snowy landscape. One thing the team really excels at in Mass Effect is making each world feel its own. This probably had something to do with giving each writer a specific planet to be responsible for. Each world feels like they have a past, have stories there. The characters feel like they have a history. There's a lineage, and this is very well served by the fact that the lore of Mass Effect is so deep. The goal of good world building, in my opinion, is to get the audience to ask questions. This is true for everything: movies, books, TV shows, comics, video games. If you can reel the audience member in with an interesting hook, just something small, you don't want to tell them everything, but just enough to have them saying, "I want to know more about that," then you're in. Creating small threads, events in history, wars, catastrophic events, species that exist as a mystery, personal vendettas. Mass Effect has many of these, and some of them we've already talked about. But that hasn't even scratched the surface. Every planet feels like it has 10 more threads we could run down and find out more. It's certainly not the most expansive or in-depth lore ever, but it's good enough to get us interested. This invests us in the story. It gets the player to buy into the narrative, to want to know more about Saren, about the Protheans, or even what came before them. We finally arrived at Peak 15, a research facility that's been locked down. To gain entry, we have to repair the systems that have been damaged. We can solve a puzzle to manually reactivate the VI on the colony, a virtual intelligence system. We then have to repair the landlines and the main reactor. We quickly find out that the station has been researching the Rachni, the insectoid creatures that sparked a massive war. They found an egg on a 2,000-year-old spaceship, and Saren ordered them to investigate. Matriarch Benezia was sent to personally oversee the project. We have to find a way to Benezia, though, since most of the area is locked down. I had to help a doctor retrieve his notes and equipment to stop a bioweapon from killing his patients. I was betrayed by one of the scientists at the station and had to defeat her. Once I helped the doctor, he gave me access into a tunnel that would take me to Benezia. We finally confronted Liara's mother, but Benezia didn't care. Benezia then sends her commando units at us, Asari and Geth working together to wipe out our squad, but we couldn't let them. We took out the 3 waves. Benezia seemed like some sort of religious zealot to Saren, not wanting to betray him. Just then she became lucid. She'd been indoctrinated, mind-controlled, seemingly an effect of his ship. She doesn't know what the origins of the ship are. It's not Geth technology, but it's advanced. She says that she couldn't stop fighting even if she wanted to, so we're forced to take her out. In the middle of a lab is the massive Rachni Queen that begins to communicate with us through a dead Asari commando. The Rachni Queen implies that they were not fully responsible for the Rachni Wars, but just trying to repopulate peacefully. She begs us not to kill her, and we have a choice: wipe out this species or let it live. I chose to let the Queen go, and she promised that she would pass on this lesson to her ancestors, trying to change the Rachni ways. Back on the ship, the Turian Council member Sparatus again chastised me for letting the Queen go, never liking the decisions I made. I kept my cool when dealing with them, though. I couldn't disrespect them or it might affect the mission. Next, it was time to head to Pharos, the other lead on Geth attacks, possibly connected to Saren. Arriving at the colony, the place is war-torn. It's a city built up high, mostly on Prothean buildings. They are constantly suffering under attacks from the Geth, and I decided to help them. First, I took a couple side quests to help the people get food, water, and power cores. Afterwards, the leader of the colony, Phi Dan, wanted me to head to Exogeny headquarters because that seems like the Geth's target. A woman wanted me to rescue her daughter inside, so we headed to Exogeny. There, we found the woman's daughter, who said the Geth were there for something called the Thorian. It was a life form that Exogeny had been researching. She needed us to deal with the Geth first. After defeating them, the woman told us that the Thorian was mind-controlling the colony. Saren must have wanted to use it to control others. We headed back to the encampment, and one of the colonists was trying to kill the rest. I talked him down and prevented him from committing murder. Next, my job was to head back into the colony and stop the Geth and the Thorian. The only problem was that the colonists would try to kill me since they were under the Thorian's control. One of the researchers gave me a gas grenade I could use to subdue the colonists, and also taking them out with a melee attack would knock them out but not kill them. I saved every one of them and descended beneath the colony to find the Thorian. Downstairs, the Thorian spits out an Asari, assumingly mind-controlled, and attacks us. We have to fight our way through a mass of enemies and make our way through this building, blowing up the pods connected to the beast on our way. Once it's done, an Asari named Shiala is freed. She tells us that Saren wanted the Thorian because it had a cipher that would lead to understanding the Prothean message in the beacons. Because she was trapped by the Thorian, she had this gift and gives it to me. I was able to understand a bit more about the message in the beacon, robots warring, but still no context. Because of my efforts, the colony of Pharos was saved. Back on the Normandy, Liara tried to help me understand the messages in my head. She said that the Eden Prime beacon was damaged, and I didn't get the full message from it. The council wanted to talk to me again, and of course, told me all the things I could have done better, like capturing the Thorian. A team on the planet Veermeyer had contacted the council asking for assistance. They were looking for information on Saren and have been attacked. We dropped in on the planet to assist them. We have to fight tons of Geth and blast our way past enemy lines to finally make our way to the Solarian doctor that's in charge. His name is Captain Kirahe, and he's found that Saren has set up a research base here. He's been breeding Krogan and has crafted a cure for the genophage. We have to destroy the place, of course, but Rex doesn't agree. This is the fate of his people here. He can't just sit back while we destroy the cure to saving his entire species. He storms off, and I talked to him, but he wasn't having it. He was starting to turn on me. I tried to convince him it was a weapon, but he wasn't listening. He pulled a gun, and luckily, I figured out how to talk him down, to make him realize his people would become a tool for Saren. Kirahe wants to use a nuke to destroy Saren's facility. We have to separate the teams and head into the back. We have a choice here. Which one of our soldiers will head off in the vanguard, Ashley or Kaiden? I chose Ashley. Since she had joined our crew, she had proven herself capable. We made our way into the base, rescued some captive Solarians, and eventually found a Prothean beacon hiding in the facility. This message is complete, though, and it's a warning that the Reapers are coming. We can conversate with Sovereign, or a version of it, in this room as well. Sovereign is actually a Reaper ship, or a Reaper itself. The Reapers were the ones that destroyed the Protheans, and they did so because they believe that organic life is a mistake. This is all a part of a cycle, and at the end of every cycle constitutes the Reapers wiping out everything. Even worse, the mass relays aren't Prothean technology, it's Reaper technology. At the bomb site, Kaiden arrived with the nuke and stood guard. As I headed up to the anti-air guns to defend the place, things turned sour. The bomb is being attacked, and someone needs to defend it while it explodes. At the same time, Ashley and the crew are being attacked at the anti-air guns. I decided to go save Ashley. Kaiden could defend the bomb, and we could reduce the casualties. At the tower, Saren himself attacks. He says that the Reapers are unstoppable, and helping them is the only way that they can survive. There's no way to beat them. I tried to talk him down, but it didn't work. Saren can be pretty difficult to fight as he flies around on some sort of hoverboard while tons of Geth attack us on the ground. Taking cover and picking our shots will see us winning, though. We don't really win, of course, as Saren makes his escape and the Normandy picks us up for extraction. Unfortunately, Kaiden didn't make it and sacrificed himself to make sure that the nuke detonated. Ashley felt guilty because of this, because she was the one to survive. Liara helps us translate the new Prothean message. It tells us that the conduit is on Ilios, a remote planet. We head back to the Citadel to let the Council know what we've found, but of course they dismiss everything. They think the Reapers are a lie concocted by Saren to give him a chance to attack the Citadel. On top of that, Ilios is in the Terminus system, and Shepard can't go there or it'll be big bad press. The Terminus systems technically aren't controlled by the Citadel. They exist outside of Citadel space, so they're effectively independent, which means we have no jurisdiction there. With this, we're removed from the mission and the Normandy is locked down. Up until this point, I had been talking to all of my crew on the ship. I checked in with them from time to time, of course, helping out Rex, Garrus, and Tali on their individual requests. I also spoke to Kaiden and Liara before one of them was gone. But I made a special connection with Ashley. She was another human aboard, and now the only one on my land crew other than myself. We were close. We talked about poetry and her life. She tried to kiss me, but Joker interrupted us. Formerly, Captain Anderson had invited me to the Flux Bar on the Citadel. When I met up with him, he revealed a plan, one to get the Normandy back. I was okay with whatever he wanted to do, so he told me to head to the ship and wait for it to be unlocked. We see Anderson punch out Ambassador Udina and unlock the ship so we can go rogue and save the universe. On the way to Ilios, Ashley came into my quarters and Anyways, we dropped down on the surface of Ilios, but we were immediately blocked off from using the Mako. We had to open the gates, but when we found the controls, we also found a Prothean VI called Vigil. This tells us a lot, which recontextualizes the story. The conduit itself is a mass relay, a backdoor that takes you right to the Citadel itself. Not only that, but the Citadel is a mass relay, which also allows the Reapers to travel directly from dark space, the places outside of the Milky Way galaxy, to the Citadel, and wipe out whatever is on it. Ilios was never found during the original Prothean genocide, so there were a few Protheans on the planet who survived the Reapers' destruction. These Protheans managed to use the conduit to damage the Citadel and prevent it from working as a relay. But that's Saren's goal, to repair the Citadel and let the Reapers flood in. With that, we have to race the Mako to the conduit to try and get to the Citadel in time. By the time we get there, Saren's attack has already started. He's gotten his Reaper Sovereign inside and attached it to the Citadel. We have to traverse the outside of the Citadel itself and defeat tons and tons of Geth before finally confronting Saren in the Citadel Tower. I tried to convince Saren that it wasn't too late to turn back. He had admitted that he'd become corrupted by the Reaper's influence, but the last thing he could do is take his own life. Joker comes in and tells us that the Council, who are on the Destiny Ascension, another ship, are in grave danger. Joker has a fleet behind him and is ready to save them at our order. Here, we can choose whether to let the Council die or save them. If I was being honest with myself, we'd be better off without them, but it wasn't the right thing to do. So I told Joker to get them out. At that point, Saren is reanimated as Sovereign itself, causing us to have to defeat him once and for all. He's a powerful boss that jumps around the battlefield and throws huge blasts and explosions at us. We take him out and Joker pilots the Normandy to success, destroying the Reaper Sovereign and stopping the potential Reaper invasion. The Council thanked us after the battle and officially determined that the humans should be the 4th Citadel Council race, earning the humans a spot on the Council. They want a nomination for a person to take the spot. I could choose Anderson or Udina, but I chose Anderson. He was a good man and an even better soldier. The Council needed to know that this wasn't the end, though, only the beginning. The Reapers were coming, and we had to make moves to stop them. Before we get into my final thoughts on Mass Effect, I'd like to briefly talk about my Renegade playthrough. In this, I tried to pick the opposite options that I chose in my first playthrough, to really try and see as much as I could of the game. I think this will also showcase the difference between a lot of the choices, and see what a different story you could have when playing Mass Effect. The first playthrough was really a tale of triumph, a diverse crew brought together by one mission, one purpose, a ship that was run well under a compassionate and strong commander, a successful attempt to save the galaxy and come closer together as friends. This story isn't that. This is one of a tyrant, trying desperately to complete his mission, a scrambling to make the right decision, and barely getting by in the face of evil, ruling with an iron fist. This time, I decided to create a new name and look for my character. I wanted him to be distinct from the John Shepard that we'll be spending 3 games with, so I named him Jacoby. I made him an Earthborn, his roots beginning in underworld gangs. He was ruthless in the Alliance military. He gets the job done. And he was a Vanguard, a combination of specialties in biotic powers and ranged weapons. I had to make him look menacing, terrifying, so I gave him a mustache. Joker was trying to screw around. He didn't realize we were on an important ship, and he pissed off the captain. Nihilus was trying to threaten me, scare me because I'm human. How very Turian of him. The captain was keeping information from me. He told me why we were really on Eden Prime. Nihilus offered to help on the mission, but this was a human problem. I didn't want him around. He joined anyways. We went down to the planet and found the Geth, found Ashley fighting with them. Kaiden said I should bring her with us, but she wasn't strong enough to save her crew. Why should she join us? She came along anyways. We found some smugglers keeping pistols from us. I forced him to give us his supplies. Nihilus was shot and some coward watched from behind crates. We disarmed the bombs and found the Prothean beacon. We failed the mission, and it was Ashley's fault. She was reckless, couldn't be trusted, couldn't save them, and she wouldn't help us. Why was she even here? Anderson said the Council would be mad because the mission was a failure, but...
The Council can kiss my ass.
I went back to the Council, and they sided with Saren, of course. On the Citadel, I had some business to take care of. A woman wanted to interview me, but I told her no. Some fan of mine wanted an autograph, but that's not what my job was. I'm not some celebrity. I'm a hero. I tracked down Rex and Garrus, not entirely trusting them, but figuring I could use them to make my crew stronger. I found Fist, and I let Rex shoot him. Good riddance. I rescued Tali. She was ungrateful, so I made her give us the information on Saren. I let her join my crew as well. This was getting out of hand. One of the best things about being a renegade is getting to pick the option, shut up and I'll tell you.
This Quarian can help us bring down Saren. I would have told you that if you hadn't jumped down my throat.
When someone asks you a question, it's just so incredibly rude and disrespectful in so many ways. Like someone is asking you something, so you tell them to shut up so that you can answer it. It's so good and such a terrible option to pick. We brought Tali's information back to the Council. They finally believed us, but didn't care about the Reapers. They wouldn't listen to me, just a group of stupid politicians in my way of getting the job done. I always get the job done. Regardless, they made me a Spectre. I wasn't honored. I deserved this. I was the best. Am I supposed to be honored to get something I'm already owed? I got control of the Normandy. I'll be honest, I couldn't be too excited about this either. Anderson was mismanaging the ship since the beginning. The crew needed a real leader. I told them as much in a speech after I took control. I took the crew to Therum, taking out the Geth and making my way to the dig site. Liara was there, whining about the Prothean barrier. She must have walked into it like an idiot. Everyone knows you don't walk into Prothean barriers. Duh. I freed her, and as soon as we got ambushed, I attacked. No one was going to get the jump on me. Liara was rambling something about the Protheans. I don't know, wasting my time. Shut up and I'll tell you. She was just another alien. I was starting to feel outnumbered on my own ship. The Council called to tell me how to do my job. I hung up on them. We found some biotic terrorists that had taken control of a ship. I shot them down. I helped Helena Blake take down the crime syndicates. She wanted control of the group. I told her to disband. I had to kill her. Garrus wanted me to track down the doctor that C-Sec let get away, and we killed him in cold blood. I headed back to the Citadel to check in. Some reporter wanted to interview me. She was clearly spinning the story, so I knocked her out. I can't believe that the Renegade option for this mission is punching her in the fucking face. Insane. I met that stupid fan again, and he wanted a picture with me. I sent him a message. I headed to Novaria to look for Benezia. They wouldn't let me keep my guns, but they didn't know I was a Spectre. Their boss shut them down before they could die by my hand. I smuggled some goods for a Hanar on the station. Lorik Keen wanted my help so I could get a garage pass out of this place. I helped him out, and Parasini wanted me to get him to testify. I did, but I warned Annalay before she could get there. They killed each other in a shootout. Not my problem. Still got the garage pass.
What happened here, Commander Shepard?
Beats me. I just got here myself.
I got to Peak 15 and repaired the systems there. They were on lockdown and wouldn't let me get to Benezia. I just broke in. Had to kill some guards. They were in my way. I got to Benezia and took her down. She tried to plead at the end that she was being mind-controlled by Saren. I didn't care. This was her fault. I killed the Rachni Queen. She needed to die. I'm not stupid enough to let another Rachni war threaten to wipe out the galaxy. The Turian council members started chastising me for killing the Rachni Queen. I hung up on them again. I was above them, and all they did was criticize, making my job harder. I made my way back to the Citadel, and this guy was still bugging me. I had to push him off again. We made our way to Pharos to try and find Saren there. The colony was weak and couldn't protect themselves against the Geth invasions. We'd killed hundreds of them, so I guess we had to hold their hand. I investigated exogeny for them and defeated the Geth there. The Thorian was taking control of the colonists. They wanted me to use gas to disable them. I wasn't going to hold my fire if people were shooting at me. I've never done that, and I wasn't going to start today. I gunned down all of the colonists, wiped them out. The Thorian sent some Asaris to attack me, but I took them down. We saved one Asari, but she wouldn't stop babbling about visions. She showed me something, so I guess that helped, but I didn't understand it. Zhu's hope was wiped out, but that wasn't my problem. They should have been stronger. The council was complaining about me hanging up on them, so I hung up on them.
Bring in a report just so you can cut us off again?
Don't piss me off and I won't disconnect you.
You don't make demands on us, Shepard. Spectres answer to the Council, not the other way around.
Goodbye, Chancellor.
That never gets old, does it?
I made my way to Virmire and met Dr. Kirahe. He said Saren was making a cure for the genophage in his base there. Rex was letting his Krogan lineage affect the mission. He pulled his gun on me. I never let someone pull their gun on me and live, especially not one of my crew. I had to make an example of him. I shot him. He proved us right about the Krogans. Maybe the cure for the genophage was a bad thing. The Krogans should fade out. I sent Kaiden with the Vanguard to attack the base. We invaded the place, and Asari was in the way. She was working for Saren. She unlocked the doors to his base, and she wanted to leave. Not on my watch. I found another Prothean beacon and met the Reaper. They weren't going to stop us. Humans are too strong. The AA guns were being attacked, and so was Ashley. I went to save Kaiden. He was a better soldier. Ashley was dead weight. Had to pare this crew down somehow. They weren't efficient. I tried to take down Saren, but he got away. We headed back to the Citadel, and of course, the Council wouldn't listen about the Reapers. They boarded my ship and took me off the case. They couldn't stop me. They hadn't before, and they wouldn't now. Anderson helped me get my ship back. We discovered the Prothean VI on Ilios, and had to use the conduit to try and save the Citadel. I made my way to Saren. I knew there was no talking him down. I had to kill him. Once I did, the Council was in trouble. I could have had Joker save the Council, or take down Sovereign. This was an obvious choice. Clearly, Sovereign was of more importance. Plus, the Council should have helped me. They should have seen this coming. I was stronger, and they were always in my way. No one gets in my way. I let them die. I took down Saren and Sovereign once and for all. The Council was gone now. Udino wanted answers. What to do now? I told him the truth, that I deliberately got rid of the Council. Udino wanted to elect a human leader, one voice to rule over everyone. I agreed. He wanted me to elect someone. I picked Anderson. He was weak. I knew I could control him. Udino was too cunning, and I didn't feel like playing past his politics. Saren was gone, but the Reapers were still coming, and I'd be the one to take them down. Easily. Mass Effect overall is still a genuinely good game. Its weak points are definitely its combat and some of its wide open areas that don't seem to have a lot inside of them. I do understand though that for its time this was incredibly impressive. Still, today it's a little lackluster by comparison. That being said, those small hurdles don't take away from the fact that Mass Effect tells a fantastic story. It also does something I think is incredibly unique in its class. Its world does not take a back seat to its story. A lot of times, world building can feel like a background thing. I'm sure some people think it should be in the background. Some would say it should be the seasoning on top of the dish. I don't think this is always the case, though. The world should be the special ingredient, mixed in with the dish. It adds extra flavor, a whole new dimension. That's what Mass Effect's world does. The world and the story are so intertwined that it's hard to see where the story ends and the lore or the world building begins. It's so well woven that we don't feel like all the interesting stuff happened before our time. We feel like it has happened, and this story is an extension of that. On top of the incredible world, the story at the forefront is fantastic as well. The tale is constantly unraveling mysteries as we go. It's establishing status quos as we play, and it's giving us just enough time to understand those and come to grips with the way the world is before breaking those barriers down and recontextualizing everything around it. As soon as we're comfortable with the idea of the Protheans and their disappearance, that's all put into question. Suddenly, it isn't that anymore. It's the Reapers, a massive, large threat, something we could never even understand the scope or size of. We're enveloped in a huge galactic threat that's existed since the beginning of time, and what are we going to do to stop it? Fight as hard as we can. The story and the world are one thing, but the choices we make along the way are just as important and impactful. You could clearly see the difference between the two playthroughs. Not only was the entire perception changed, not only are John Shepard and Jacoby Shepard two completely different people, but they end up in extremely different places. Mainly, Rex is dead. Jacoby shot him. He's down 2 crew members. The Council is gone in the Renegade playthrough. Like I said before, Mass Effect was planned to be a trilogy, and they took these choices into account. These will have ramifications in Mass Effect 2 and carry over to change the nature of the tale that game will tell. I remember being a kid and loving when a game recognized that I had played other games in a series. Even games like Yakuza reward you with just small gifts. Famously, Metal Gear Solid would read your memory card. When I played Mass Effect for the first time and I realized that my game would completely transfer over to the second one, that every choice I made in the first game would affect the second one, I was floored. It was my dream to play something like this. Now, whether these choices would really have an effect in the end is another story, but we'll get there in time. Truly, though, for a fan of games with choice mechanics, Mass Effect does let you have real consequences on the world and characters around you. It's not a full role-playing game entirely. It tries to ride the line between a completely laid-out story and letting you make your own choices. It's a different genre of its own, but I think it does this really well. And in the end, you feel like you're a part of a mass, grand narrative. And the only thing you can do is wonder how all this will end. Mass Effect was met with critical acclaim upon its release. Most loved its style of storytelling, noting its depth in relationships and characters. A lot of critics took umbrage with the combat design and the inventory management, though, which I'll note is still a problem with the remasters. The game sold well, with 1 million units sold in its first 3 weeks. Within months, it had sold 2 million copies and generated an estimated $120 million. The game won awards for Best RPG at the Spike Video Game Awards and the IGN Awards, as well as Game of the Year for the annual Interactive Achievement Awards and the New York Times. Clearly, with incredible critical and audience reception, the game was greenlit to have a sequel. The trilogy was already planned, so why not continue through with it? Mass Effect 2 would begin development shortly after the release of the first game, but we'll talk about that next time. Bye, Dad.